Hi, Editing Cara coming to you here to give you an updated account of information related to what's been currently going on and things you can do to help. So over the past, I think it's like almost 2 weeks now, there's been a lot of peaceful protests that have then turned violent because of police action in the US relating to the death of, or the murder really, of George Floyd in the US, who was killed by police, as well as the vast numbers of black lives that have also been lost to police action and racism in general. Not just police, but police are a big deal in this situation. So protests have been happening. There's been some positive change even since I filmed these this video and the other one that will also, these two videos, because I'll probably include the same clip at the start of both. There's been some positive action that's been happening, but there's still a lot to go. The officers that were responsible for killing George Floyd have been charged with murder or second-degree murder and accessory to murder. I'm not super familiar with how the degrees work in the US system, since I don't live in it, but that's better than it was previously. And there's arguments for and against, I believe, arguing for first-degree murder. But there are still plenty of people who have not seen appropriate action based on their deaths, including Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was killed and shot and killed in her home while she was sleeping by police, and none of her murderers have been charged, as well as so many voices that have been silenced by police action and violence against black people in the American community and abroad. Australia also has a major problem with police action against Indigenous people, and we've even just since everything's been happening in the US, the media action covering police injustice against Aboriginal people in Australia has been improving. Previously it was very swept under the rug and not talked about, but I've seen, like, just in 2 weeks, like, there's been like 3 or 4 different things hit the news. It's atrocious. And there's been movement here in Australia as well to support Indigenous lives and against police brutality. So I'm going to be linking down below a whole bunch of petitions, places you can, God, the lighting is going in and out, sorry. Petitions, places you can donate. I personally donated to Minnesota Freedom Fund right at the start when they were needing donations. I believe now they've got they're like full up for donations currently, but I also then later donated to a group that will equally divide your donation between a whole bunch of bail funds that are part of, like, that have signed up to be part of this service. Bail funds are really good because your donation not only works right now to get bail to people who are arrested as part of the protests, but also when that bail money is returned after court dates, that can then be used to help someone else down the line. They're a fund that the money comes back and can get used again and again, so I really like bail funds for that. My next lot of donations are going to go to Indigenous Australian resources, which I will link below. There will also be a whole bunch of petitions, as I said, and I will also link some playlists of black creators in our community, which, if you're not already watching their content, you should. And so I'll link that there as well. So carry on with the video. Hi guys, we're trying out a new filming angle because the sun is ruining my angle I've been using. It's just not having a good time. Can't bother waiting to film, so we're trying out this angle. I feel like we're zoomed in a lot more. I feel like you and I are feeling really intimate, and you can see my mess of a bedside table, so like but we're here, we're gonna try this out. So today I'm filming my May wrap-up. This is a kind of condensed version of my wrap-up. I did film a specific Believe-a-thon wrap-up featuring all 31 books that I read for Believe-a-thon, 30 and a DNF. So this is everything that was in the 2 weeks outside of Believe-a-thon, which is still a shit ton of books. I read 45 things in May. Who is she? What the fuck? But yeah, let's jump in. So first off this month I read Wicked As You Wish by Ranger Pecco. I listened to this, wait, was this actually the first thing I finished? I'm pretty sure it was. Yes, this is, I listened to this on audiobook, though I feel like I want to reread it again physically. This is a new series from Ranger Pecco. It's a, I would say like medieval fairy tale retelling in modern day Arizona, or actually kind of like spans all the United States, but it's very different. It's like an alternate magical history kind of setting, and we follow Tala as our main character, who is a Filipino immigrant to the US, and everyone kind of has magic. She has a magic that allows her to like suppress, like no spells work on her. And then she's friends with the prince, who is the sole survivor of this royal family, the royal family of Avalon, which has kind of like been lost. And he's the only remaining family member, and he's going to like try and free Avalon, but he needs like Excalibur, and there's like, yeah, there's a lot of Arthurian legend, but also other fairy tales that are all tied into this. Lots of familiar elements done in a new way. I actually really loved that about this, and it was my favorite component. The way the magic system was uniquely modern, with lots of reflections back to fairy tale and legend elements. It was very diverse. There's a non-binary side character. Is there a sapphic relationship? I think there is. There's definitely like male side relationships. The actual plot was really fun, but I feel like that's what I would like to reread it for. Like, I feel like listening on audiobook, I lost a few plot thread elements. So I think when book 2 in this series, the series is called 100 Names for Magic, when book 2 comes out, I think I will reread this physically and read book 2 physically. But yeah, it was super fun. Like, it was just fun. I gave this 4 stars. Then April and I, my best buddy April, I will try and remember to link her in the cards. We buddy read Night of the Dragon by Julie Kagor. This is the 3rd and final book in the Shadow of the Fox series. We've kind of buddy read all of them, I think. Then maybe the second one we were like a week apart, but we were reading all of them together. This is about a kitsune and a kind of like samurai ninja guy who's carrying this cursed sword, and there's a scroll that every 1,000 years, if you bring them all together, you can make one wish to a dragon, and there's like demons that are trying to make that wish to destroy the world. You know, you feel. This is obviously a Own Voices Japanese inspired fantasy. The first book reads very much, and I feel like the whole series does to a degree, but the first book especially reads a lot like an anime. It's got a lot of like episodic events where like you'll deal with a little problem and then move on, kind of thing. But I really enjoyed that about this series, though some people might find that like an inconsistent pacing or plot build. I liked it. And that kind of continues here, but the plot threads are a little bit more smooth, and like it's more like a season 3 of an anime where every episode is building to the big battle kind of thing. I love the world, love the characters. This does have a little bit of a kill your gaze kind of thing going on, which I didn't appreciate. And the like, if I'm remembering correctly, the like climax for me was a little rushed, but overall I really enjoyed this. It was like a good read, so I gave it 3 stars. It's like good but not fabulous. It's just like good. Then I read Thorn by Intisar Kainani. I read this on I listened to this on audiobook. It is a Goose Girl retelling with, I would say, let me try and look it up. Oh, it is also, while I'm looking up what area it's meant to be based in, it is like, it's fantasy, but it's inspired by somewhere. I'm checking because I don't want to just say something and be wrong, but it is also, it was previously self-published and has now been picked up by a big 5, I think. So it was the author's debut work, but she's released other stuff since, and this is now being re-released by a major publisher. It is, I feel like it's like, why am I struggling so hard? The author has lived before in Saudi Arabia. I feel like it's got very Arabian vibes. You look at like covers and stuff, so maybe it's meant to be like that kind of area. It's definitely Middle Eastern in idea, but it is a fantasy world. I also read the short story that goes with it, which is The Bone Knife, which is kind of a prequel for the sequel to come, like a hint at the sequel to come. I gave both of these, like the actual novel and the short story, 3 stars. I feel like for me, I just struggled to get fully engaged in the characters in the world. It might have to do with the fact that I was reading an audiobook, not a physical copy, and I might have enjoyed it more in a physical copy. But yeah, I liked the plot, but I also have never really read The Goose Girl before. I feel like I tried to read it and couldn't really get into it. So I feel like a lot of the retelling elements, like, I didn't understand, so that would have added more interest and intrigue to see how it was like playing off the Goose Girl trope and storyline, but I just wasn't familiar enough to really get into those ideas. So I feel like this was just like a 3-star. For me, it was good, but it wasn't anything special, but for other people it definitely could be. It is definitely, I think, well written, but I did struggle to connect to the plot and characters through audiobook, so do keep that in mind, that this is a review of the audiobook, and I think the physical copy could have been a bit different. Also, this was so long ago, I'm really struggling to remember. I feel like 45 books ago, or like 40 books ago now, it was a long time. I also read AnaK by Jenny Lee, which is a AnaK retelling featuring a the AnaK is half Korean, Korean American, and this is bizarre. It's featuring teenagers, but I feel like it reads like they're all in their 20s, early 20s, but like maybe that's just a reflection of the fact that they're filthy rich, so they can get away with a lot. I don't know, they're like, one of the characters is like 15 and is doing a lot of shit, ends up in rehab. It's nuts. Everyone's going a bit crazy, very dramatic. If you're aware of the like plot of AnaK, I feel like this has a lot of similar beats, but then a lot of dramatic stuff happens that's a bit different. It was super fun. I listened to this on audiobook and read along physically. The audiobook is narrated by Jenna Ushkowitz from Glee, so I was like keen to listen to the audiobook. She did a great job narrating, but I did read along physically as well. There were so many characters. I was really connected to all the characters. I was there like, what the fuck is happening all the time? Sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad reasons. Like, it's incredibly dramatic, but it was super fun. There's trigger warnings for like almost literally everything. I haven't written a written review, but definitely look up trigger warnings, or you can let me know if there's a specific trigger you need to be looking out for, and I can let you know if it's in this if you shoot me a message, because there's a lot of shit that goes down. But I loved this. I gave it, what did I end up giving it? I gave it 4 stars. It is incredibly dramatic. I tweeted it. It's like a 4.5. Yes. It was fun. It was a ride. Another bit of a ride, but a slower paced ride, was The Wolf of Onyaro by K.S. Veloso. This is a Filipino own voices, I want to say, fantasy. It is a, we follow, what's our main character's name? I can't remember. They call her the Bitch Queen. Talion. She has taken the queenship, and her husband were meant to rule together, but on their coronation her husband just like fucks off. He leaves, and she's left with their son, and it's a lot about their personal dynamic and what it means for their kingdom, and it's got a lot going on. But for me, this was a really good fantasy, but for me it lost a star. I ended up giving this 4 stars because the pacing was a little off. It's very political but also very personal, like political but really just focusing in on Queen Tal. So until like maybe halfway through, it just not much was happening. I feel like it wasn't getting anywhere, and then things started going crazy in the second half as things were revealed and political machinations were maneuvered. But the first half was really setup and character development, so it just kind of felt a bit slow. But overall, I really enjoyed the characters. I think it really put in that character work, so I did really love the characters, and I loved that they were all so flawed. Like, she is a hero, but also like a lot of the problems were kind of, she fed into them and it was her own doing to an extent. And I just, it was good, but it just, yeah, the pacing kind of held me back from that perfect 5 star. But this was a really solid fantasy featuring a female lead, and like unapologetically female lead. It was pretty good. Then April and I did a lot of buddy reads this month, but we buddy read The Silence of Bones by June Heir. This is a new release Korean story. It's a historical mystery. We follow our main character, what's her name? Seol, who is part of the police force. So in Korea in this time, which is 1800s, I think, yeah, the men aren't allowed to touch women's bodies except for their direct family members. So the police force has these servant women who are essentially their hands. Well, I mean, they can't even be like interview women, the men. So these servants act as their like go-between. As servants, they can interact with the male police members, but they can also interact with female suspects and victims, etc. And she gets dragged in, like she is called in to help investigate this murder case, and it's a lot of political and religious things going on. There's religious unrest with the rise of Catholicism in Korea at this time, and it's dealing a lot with that and serial killers, and she's also looking for her brother who left home when she was much younger, and she has a very strange memory of her childhood, and she's trying to like figure that out. This was so good. It was super twisty. As April said in her wrap up of this, it has, or in her like review of this, it has like every chapter ends in a plot twist, but you don't know what's reliable or not. It's got like, we are closely following our main character, so there's a lot of unreliable narrator things going on. She gets given information and she's trying to work it out, but she doesn't always get it right. And I just, this was so good. The only thing I didn't like was the way one ending element played out, which April and I agreed on. We were both like, oh, why did you do that? It just kind of, that made part of the ending fall flat, but I loved my experience reading this so much. This was a 5 star. It's also a debut. Like, for a debut, it was so good. Excuse me, cats. Next up, I read Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. I have mixed feelings about this. What did I end up rating it? I ended up giving it a 3 stars. This is a Chinese-inspired fantasy, which was described as Milan meets Project Runway, which I totally understand the comparison. It definitely has some Milan elements where she's like going to fill in her father's place in this case, a competition to become the royal tailor. And then she's pretending to be a boy, and she's also pretending to have a disability, which is a thing that is definitely problematic and should definitely be considered going into this. She does like fake a disability, which is a bit... What didn't work for me about this was that the actual competition is like a third of the book, and the rest of the book is kind of like a quest. And I didn't like the quest as much as I liked the competition. I wish the competition was more of the story, though I did like where it will be going for book 2. Like, I'm really interested in what's going to be happening in the second book, so I probably will pick it up. But yeah, this kind of like problematic elements aside, like if we just like have the privilege of being able to separate that out, which is a privilege, I acknowledge that, then yeah, this for me just was the wrong balance of plot elements to be perfect. I also was like not fully behind the romance. I didn't hate it, but I wasn't like fully invested in it. It grew on me more towards the end, but it took a lot for me to get attached. So 3 stars for this. If you didn't notice, I was participating in Asian Readathon this month, so everything I've read so far is from Asian authors, as will be nearly everything else in this wrap up. The only thing that was also not for Believeathon, was an unauthorized fan treatise by Lauren James, which I've been reading over the past couple of months. This was a weekly released serial story. It's kind of a fandom culture murder mystery. It's super bizarre, incredibly bizarre. I ended up giving it, what should I end up rating it? I rated it 4 stars because it really like kept you on your toes and it was twisting and turny. If you've read The Loneliest Girl in the Universe, there is fan fiction that the main character writes, and it's that show that she's writing fan fiction about that is like the plot of this. It's the actors in the show are getting kind of like stalked by our main character, who's writing blog posts, like Tumblr style blog posts about stuff. It's weird. I thought it was the most accurate representation of like the toxicity of fan culture that I've ever seen. My friend Lauren and I were talking about it as new ones were released, and we were talking about how like she was in the Harry Styles fandom, or like the One Direction fandom, and I was in the Glee fandom, and there was stuff that both of us were like, that happened, like that exact thing happened to like totally different people, but in both fandoms. Stuff that was like very toxic and weird, that we were both really intimately familiar with, and we were like, oh, she really was there for some, I don't know what fan cultures the author was a part of, but you could really see like things that you were like, that is accurate, that has happened. So like definitely the most accurate portrayal of the toxicity of fan culture I've ever seen, and it was nuts. The ending threw me for a loop. I really want a sequel because it left so many questions unanswered, but yeah, I give that 4 stars. Then 2 weeks happened for Believeathon after reading that stack, and then we came to the final week of the month, and I started off reading the Henna Wars, which by Adiba Jaigudar. My accent is probably terrible, I apologize. So the Henna Wars is a YA contemporary following Nishat, and she is a Bengali immigrant in Ireland, which is the story's own voices for. I'm pretty confident Adiba is also Bengalese Muslim living in Ireland, and the school that she's at she's dealing with a lot of racial tension and racism from other students, and there's a business class thing where they're all going to make a business, and she decides to start a henna business because that's a strong part of her culture. And they were recently at, her and her sister were recently at a wedding, and she did her and her sister's henna, and it worked really well and she was really proud of it. And so she decides to set up a little henna business, and a friend of hers, what is the friend's name? Why am I blanking? Her crushes. So this is a queer story. Her crush is, what is the crush's name? Like, what's the love interest's name? Flavia. Her crush, Flavia, also attended the same wedding. Flavia is Brazilian, Afro-Brazilian, and so she is black but Brazilian. The love interest Flavia is Afro-Brazilian and is also attended the same wedding, and she was really like appreciating Nishat's henna and the bride's henna, and she decides to set up her own henna business because she's an artist. And it's a lot about like the strain and hurt Nishat feels around Flavia's cultural appropriation, and a lot of learning and exploring racial and ethnic cultural elements, and how those play out in a like microcosm school setting. And I thought it was super powerful. The romance was really, really sweet, and the learning that like the healthy learning that Flavia undertakes, being like critiqued and like, how do I want to talk about this without feeling like Nishat has to like do all the work, because that's not how it was. That's exactly not how it was. But their like attraction to each other and the ways in which Flavia really like works to understand where she was wrong and apologize and like overcome that, and then the other racial dynamics within the school, including Flavia's cousin. And I know it's complicated, it's meant to be complicated, but the racism, xenophobia, ethnic and cultural components in this was so strong, but also the love between the two girls was so strong, and it was just so good. I loved this with my whole heart. I listened to the audiobook, I slammed through it in a day, I couldn't stop reading, I loved it to pieces. I gave it 5 stars. I don't know how to talk about this like as a white person in a good way that like explains to you how good it is and how nuanced it is, but like, oh, it's so good, you should read it. Then I picked up Shadow Glass, which was my second Rinja Paker read of the month. I've been reading the Bone Witch series for like over a year now, and it's a 3-star series for me, which I'm so disappointed in, but I'm finally glad to have finished it and not have it like lingering over my head. For me, I think I just don't have the memory to appreciate this series. This is a Filipino fantasy told in 2 timelines and kind of 2 perspectives. It's 2 perspectives, but more specifically 2 timelines. One's kind of more like a 3rd-person timeline and one's like a 1st-person timeline, but the 3rd-person timeline does have a like present narrator. It makes sense if you're reading it. But the like 2 timelines span across the full book, so like the past timeline gets to book 3 before you're rolling back to the present timeline in book 1. And for me, there were just so many thread elements to keep track of and plot things that are changing from book to book that I just really struggled. Also, the narration really doesn't leave much room for, or doesn't provide many drops of information to help you guide your way through the story. It just kind of like dumps it all out there. I enjoyed the actual plot in this, but I feel like I was missing stuff because I couldn't remember enough of things that had happened in the previous books. I do recommend, if you're wanting to read this series, binge read it, but also you do have to have the capacity to like hold these different elements in your head at the same time, even going from chapter to chapter, because you flip perspectives every 2nd chapter. Like, you go a chapter and then there's a interlude from the modern, like current perspective and backwards and forwards. And for me, I just had a hard time holding those elements in my hands and juggling them and keeping track of what timeline we were in and what was happening to who and which characters we were talking about. Even in the dialogue, sometimes it wasn't clear who was narrating what. And I feel like I was just too dumb for this book. Other people love this series, so it's definitely not the book's fault. I feel like I just did not have the memory and mental capacity to read and appreciate, like, to really appreciate this series. So I gave this 3 stars. The magic system is really cool, but yeah, I struggled right the way through. Like, I knew I struggled after reading the second book because I could hardly figure out how things applied from the first book. So I wrote a summary of the second book in my phone and I went to read it before rereading this, and even the summary didn't make sense to me. So that's how much we struggled. But we got there. It's a 3-star series. Then April and I buddy read our final buddy read of the month, and that was why am I not focused? There we go. Empress of All Seasons by Emiko Jean. This is a Japanese fantasy. We're following a yokai named Mari, who is a animal wife, and the animal wives essentially they have like a pretty beautiful side, and then they can transform into beasts, and they seduce men, marry them, and then steal their riches. That's like their thing. And she's going to compete in these games to win the hand of the emperor or the prince to become empress, because she was not classically beautiful, or as beautiful as the other animal wives. So her mum trained her in combat instead, because to become empress in this time period, in this like Japanese spy world, you have to like defeat these like 4 rooms that each represent a season. And it's a lot of like fighting against the elements, but also against each other. It was very Hunger Games-esque in those components. And then it also had some rebellion elements. So it was like Japanese Hunger Games, but like not. To me, the one bit about this that I struggled with was, I didn't even struggle. I was just like, I give this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, but don't expect this to be a romance. For me, it like, the only thing I was really mad at about this was that the romance for me is not there at all. I don't feel the chemistry between the characters. I feel like it's hardly in there. Like, it's very backseat. But then some of the character motivations towards the end of the conflict were based on romance that wasn't really developed, wasn't really there. I didn't feel chemistry in. Then you might like, there's a hint of a love triangle, as in like a second character that loves the main character, but she's not interested in him at all. But I don't feel like she was interested in either of the 2 guys. There's also a sapphic hint of a side character, but that doesn't end well. Yeah, essentially there's like no romance in this, but there are a few like romantic, it's definitely not a happily ever after romance wise, like, but there's a couple of like hints of romantic elements, but I don't even think they're that hinty. They kind of there. Really, this is like an action rebellion kind of story, and I really appreciated it for that. I gave it 4 stars. It is a standalone, but I will say it feels like it could be a series. Like, it took from this part of this big story, so I could see other bits being pulled, but it does stand on its own. Then I read Blood Heir by Emily Wen Zhao, which I listened partially on audiobook and then partially read along with the audiobook. I ended up giving this 3 stars. It's not that good. It's like a 2.5 stars, but I'm rounding it up to be generous. For me, this like took from the wrong period of the story. Like, we should have seen more before the start of this. Again, this doesn't have a romance, but I feel like people might think it does, or the author's trying to have a romance, but I didn't see any of it. The plot for me was a bit haphazard, and I didn't really understand where it was trying to go. Or like, I could see the overarching bit, but I didn't understand why all these little inner plots were happening. I had a hard time keeping track of the characters, but that might have been because I was listening to an audiobook, like side characters. Like there was one whole side character that came in right at the end that I was like, have you been here any of the rest of this time? Did I just like not notice you? I don't know. So that might be hindered by the fact that I listened to like the first half exclusively on audiobook with no text. Maybe I just lost track of elements. But yeah, I kind of struggle with this. Also, the magic system doesn't make a whole lot of sense. People have, so this is, have I explained what this is? This is essentially a very loose Anastasia retelling, like a Romanov retelling. So we follow Anastasia, whose father was killed, and she has the ability to control and manipulate blood. So she was accused of killing him and is on the run. She's trying to prove she didn't do it to then come back. That's like the overarching plot line. But the blood magic, like lots of people have magic, but not everyone, but like nearly everyone whose main character has it. But they have control over different things, but that wasn't really explained well. But then if you have these powers, you're oppressed, but that wasn't explained well. There was a lot of talk when this was coming out or in arcs about how it talks about slavery. And I definitely think, like, if you take the US-centric lens off it, it's not like anything, I didn't notice anything like intentionally or like blatantly bad about it, but it doesn't explore race or ethnicity as a like factor in that, which I feel like is lacking. It's talking much more about these like magic systems as a form of oppression, which I don't even really understand why these people were oppressed. That was very poorly explained. And yeah, the magic system was like both thrown far too wide open where anything could be possible, but also not explained well enough. Like, I had no comprehension of how this magic system worked, really. And there were, yeah, characters just keep dropping in like way later without any like early development. Character development was really patchy. Maybe I need to change this to a 2 stars. I'm being generous, probably. I should, like, it's a 2.5, but I feel like I should round it down, not round it up. I'm not going to change that because there's a lot of negatives. Alright, well, hit me up. We're changing it to a 2-star. That's blood air. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And then finally we finished the month with Forest of 1,000 Lanterns by Julie C. Dow. I gave this a 4 stars. This is a, if you didn't know, because it was kind of pretty popular for a while there, this is a Evil Queen from Snow White retelling in a Chinese setting, I think. This for me only suffered from a pacing issue. I just feel like it was a little bit boring at the start and then it picked up later, and I really loved the ending. I thought the main character was really complex and interesting as she, like, this is like her descent and then like descent into madness and development of status of like empress to then be like the evil queen at the start of the next book, which is then when she's going to be taken down, I'm guessing. And we're following from the like Snow White's character. I really liked it, but I did think, yeah, the start was a little bit slow. Otherwise, yeah, it was good. I gave it 4 stars. Like, I don't have much to say about this. I only finished it last night. It was good. I will probably pick up book 2. I'm excited for it. I might listen to it on audiobook or listen and read along. We'll see. So those are all the books that I read other than my Believeathon reads. Don't forget to go check that out if you're interested. In the month of May, keep an eye out for, I have already posted my June TBR if you want to see what I'll be reading in June. And also there are plenty of other stuff that I'll be reading in June, so keep an eye out for my June wrap up coming in like a month. And otherwise I'll see you soon with another video. Thanks, bye.